Hi everybody, welcome to Power of Knowing Forum's C-Suite Strategy. Elevate every move, scale beyond. And our topic of discussion today is influence isn't love, communication that drives growth. Your go-to podcast on tech, cyberspace, strategy and growth. I'm your host Prem Kumar AS, and today we will explore power of communication and influence. A special thanks to all joined for Power of Knowing Forum episode 278 live on LinkedIn. We are honored to have Pranav Mehta, Fintech international business professional, leader, general management experience, and a CXO Incubator of 2020 from CASHe, joining us today. And let's welcome our esteemed podcast speaker to the event and dive into the topic. Hi Pranav. Welcome to our show, sir. How are you today?
Hi, Prem. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
A small intro about yourself, Pranav.
Yes, sure. Hello everyone. My name is Pranav Mehta. I am a fintech professional. I work as the chief risk officer at CASHe. But besides that, there are so many other things that I've done. So I've worked in investment banking in the past. I've worked in real estate with Phoenix Mills. And then I was a healthcare professional at Medtronic, where I was looking at business development and strategy. So that's been my background over the last 20 years. And I'm honored to be invited by Prem and to speak about my experiences on leadership.
Thank you, Pranav. Let's dive into the topic. My question first is that why does quiet and high clarity communication outperform loud charismatic for enterprise growth?
So, Prem, this topic that we've chosen today, I think it's very close to my heart. I mean, a lot of it resonates with my personal style of leadership. So, for instance, what you talked about, quiet clarity, what I think is that leadership needs to build trust within the organization and with external stakeholders. Quiet clarity builds that trust. And that trust is then helpful to scale up the organization to actually go to where you want to go, right? If I'm not wrong, the CEO of Microsoft, Mr. Satya Nadella, I think he mentioned in one of his interviews that the important thing about leadership is to talk less and listen more. So be quiet, learn from others, give others an opportunity to speak. And then when words are chosen with intent, with clarity, people are able to move faster. They are doing less mistakes. There are fewer misfires, so to speak. So those are the advantages of this personal style of leadership. So as they say, loud charisma can inspire moments, but it is the quiet clarity that actually builds and sustains the momentum.
Oh, the one skill that I was told was listening as a leader, right? So, and in Simon Sinek's books, what he talks also is about you should be the last person in the room to talk, and you should gather all the information as a leader to understand the overall picture and how the stakeholders look at the problem or how they represent is what I understand, Pranav. So coming to what is in for me is as a mid manager, if master subtype style influence is strategy views.
So if I understand your question, see, in today's modern organizations, influence is not about titles, right? You can be somebody who's not part of the senior leadership, but still have a lot of influence because of your communication skills, your business acumen, and so on. So, this is what I mean by subtle influence. So, it earns you trust, it earns you respect within the organization. This is something that titles don't. So, one has to break away from that mold of only a title equals to influence. That is no longer the case. So, I'm sure many organizations do it, but I've heard of Amazon doing this very, very clearly, that they get people to write like 6 page memos or less to put a point across. And that contribution is done by a lot of the middle managers. They're not necessarily the senior managers who are doing this and putting it together, crafting the strategy, but it is the middle managers who, with their knowledge, their reality of the market, they are the ones who are actually pushing it forward. So influence in my mind is like behind the scenes. You have to know your stuff and you have to be able to communicate it better. That is what I think is the meaning of subtle influence and how leaders should approach different challenges in their day-to-day life.
I think the pointer is very clear is that subtle influences have a great impact, right? So that's what I think you are taking into consideration. How do silent signal leaders cut decision latency by 40% or putting a percent of 40%? What is your take on it?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it's 30%, 40, 50, or whatever the number is. That's not important. But it's leading back to my earlier comments, right? That leaders who have that subtle influence, who are clear, the quiet clarity that we spoke about, they are able to, communicate better within the organization. They lead through clarity. Again, I'm just repeating myself. It's not leading through control. So one has to build that culture where you are able to provide that input to your team and enable them to take decisions. So then that is how you will reduce the latency, whether it's by 40% or any other number. So you do not wait for consensus. You've given the context to the team, and then they are able to operate within that, and then they are able to, take things forward. So that clarity is what is pushing things forward and reducing the decision time.
Coming to that decision point, why do growth KPIs stall when top voices dominate the town hall?
I see the way I think of it is that when the loudest leader or the people who speak the loudest, they may not necessarily be the ones who may know the most, right? And there is also that tendency for a lot of people to step back. It's like whoever talks the loudest and pounds the table, they are the one who grab the most attention. But that is not what we should do in an organization. So there is this famous professor at Harvard Business School called Amy Edmondson. She had done a lot of good research on something called as psychological safety. So what that means is that if a leader is more empathetic versus being loud and aggressive, you promote more sharing culture, more congenial culture, more collaborative culture. So I mean, I'm just trying to relate that to your question when you talked about growth KPIs were stalling. It
Hmm.
could perhaps be because the people who are loud are not encouraging that positive culture. So that psychological safety is not there. So I would just like to say that loud leaders perhaps might be silencing progress, but it is the quiet leaders who actually build that culture and are able to take people along with them.
Valid point there, Pranav. Now, what you said also, when there is a loud voice, it is not necessary that they are having a right intention in terms of. I think. there is a pointer that we should look at is to see how they interact, how they listen is what I think your pointer says, right? Am I right in
Yes,
saying that,
absolutely.
Pranav? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now,
Active listening, the culture of listening is very important. I agree.
what revenue lift follows when sales techs use you twice as often as we is one pointer that I wanted to understand. Because
Uh,
I'm not talking about a team when we talk about you. I'm talking
yeah.
about a person, one
Yes.
person. When we talk about we, it's a team, right? So your take on
Correct.
it.
So, see, again, I'm going into when one is in a sales pitch mode.
Hmm.
There are times when we use the word we, and by we, I mean the customer and the salesperson together, or both the organizations together. That is when the salesperson is trying to create a more collaborative kind of an atmosphere, right? That is the time when we use we. And there
Hmm.
are a lot of occasions when we need to show that we are in the same boat, we are understanding the problem that the customer has, and together we are trying to solve it. So, that kind of a collaborative conversation probably helps build rapport with the customer. At some points, when you have to close the deal, there is research that indicates that if you use the word you
Hmm.
might be able to close the deal faster. What it means is
Exactly.
that you have to explain to the customer that by taking this service or product that I, as a salesperson, am offering, you, as the customer, are going to be able to solve so many problems and achieve so much more than what they are doing currently. I think that is what I think. Is the importance of having these pronouns, sometimes we as in a collaboration to build rapport, and sometimes you to tell them that, okay, this is something that is going to benefit you, and then that will help them, you know, take the conversation forward. So that's how I sort of understood your question, and I hope I've been able to answer that.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at. Now, coming to the next point that I want to understand is how do we concise narrative across unlocked, cross-functional, aligned in strategy offsites.
See, there's probably one skill that no school really teaches you, right, that well. And what I mean by that is, uh, as you become senior and as you present more and more, one needs to have some elements of storytelling in your communication style. What that means is that you need to paint a picture, you need to describe things around you, you need to have a vision and be able to articulate that a lot better instead of just putting some bullet points on a slide, right? I mean, senior leaders need to move away from that. So, to answer your questions, if you are able to create stories, maybe share them examples on how customers have benefited from the product or service you had. I remember when I was at Medtronic, which is one of the Fortune 100 medical device companies, we used to have customers record their videos with their consent, of course, and they used to explain how that particular product helped them in their life. And that is a very powerful way of communicating that, hey, this is something that we do. And if we were able to help this one individual, we could help hundreds and thousands of more individuals. So having this concept of micro videos or short stories or something similar in your strategy offsites, in your communication with your organization, that would really help. I mean, having this concise narrative arc of storytelling would be really powerful as you communicate through the length and breadth of your organization.
So on that, Pranav, uh, one way of when you are talking about Amazon's 6 page aligning 12 departments in 1 hour, right? So that's one thing that you are looking at different cross sections, right? Cross departments are aim to roadblock the change, right? Roadblock the change, right? So
Correct.
even a draft of 2 page narrative also before happens at times, right? What do you think? Now coming to Why should leadership emails cap to 150 words? I'm not sure whether it is saying that it should be short or there, but why should an email caption should be words cap should be about 150 words or maximum for maximum influence? Because when you write big story of an email, people don't tend to get lost on it. And I have a personal experience where my boss, I also used to write big letters. Then my boss came and told me, why are you writing stories? Write
Yeah.
it very clear. So your take on it.
See, the way I think of it is that brevity means conviction. So if you are able to get your point across in a shorter number of sentences, in a shorter number of words, that actually portrays to the others that you really know what it is and you have that conviction that this is the right path forward, the right next steps or action to be taken, right? Every extra word, in my opinion, would then dilute that impact, dilute that urgency that you create. Again, we briefly, you mentioned about Amazon, right? So I think they are very ruthless in that six-pager memo or whatever they do, that you need to have a concise document. It cannot be something which is overflowing that nobody is paying attention to, but something which is very meaningful, which is very brief, very short, is what is required. I mean, in today's day and age where everybody's attention span is less than like 60 seconds, I mean, if you don't have their attention in that, you've lost the audience, right? So you need to keep your messages concise, restrict it to a smaller portion, like you mentioned, 150 words or thereabouts. I think it's a very good strategy to follow. It's a very good skill to have, that you are able to communicate within a short paragraph or two. And the more you hone it, the more your thoughts will become clear. So that's
I
my take
think
on it.
I think what you're saying is 150 word rule equals inbox impact, right? So that's an
Yeah,
impact that
yeah,
comes in, right? And
exactly.
that gives a larger volume or the punch that is needed when you are able to concise and send a strong message, right? So how what hidden lever lies in strategic silence during negotiations in specific?
I think silence is very important, not just in negotiation, but in any conversation, right? Again, going back to what we spoke earlier about listening. So when you talk less and are silent, you are encouraging some of the others to speak, right? You're not talking over them, you are not interrupting them. And sometimes, especially in a negotiation like what you asked, it might just help you, as in your counterparty might say some things that might be of interest to you or might offer you some concessions which may not have been there had you been constantly speaking. So I think one needs to be mindful of how much they speak, and then sometimes just pause. Taking like a 3 second pause or 4 second pause is very powerful. It's not easy, as in to fill a conversation with a pause, but if you are able to do it, I think it would really help. I've heard anecdotes, and I don't know how true they are, but I believe at Apple, Mr. Tim Cook, he uses this strategy, this skill, and whenever he's talking to somebody in a negotiation situation, I think it helps him. So these are things that we have to learn from such great leaders and see how we can look at improving ourselves.
I think in one of the videos which I saw on Steve Jobs, where he takes a pause, a brief pause, and a question is asked, and he looks at different angles, and then after a brief pause, about 30 seconds, he gives a message, and that message is more impactful rather than responding immediately. So, and that
Yes,
pause gave him a place to think, is what I felt when I saw that video. I think that's more relevant here, and
correct.
in some of the ways we are saying silent cells use the pause at times is what I felt could be one of
Correct.
the pointers that we can look at. Now coming to next, how does micro feedback culture boost quarterly OKR hit rate? Because you need to look at
As
OKRs.
yeah, as managers, obviously we need to do appraisals and gauge our team members, give them constructive feedback on how they could grow and go to the next level. What I dislike, and this is something happens in my organization as well, but I need to influence and make things better, is that instead of an annual appraisal, why can't we do it more frequently, whether it's quarterly or monthly, or anytime you have a conversation with an employee, how about giving that micro feedback, that 90-second or 2-minute kind of a feedback on, hey, these are the few good things that you've been doing over the last few days that I've been working with you. Maybe these are a couple of things that you could do better. uh, don't make it very critical. Obviously, have elements of encouraging what they are doing and pointing out maybe one item or so that they could definitely look at improving. Maybe they're not aware of it, but make them conscious of it. So I would want organizations to do this, as in give frequent feedback, because it helps you then correct any deviations that are there from the norm. Versus if you wait till the end of the year to give that feedback, maybe that impact is lost. Maybe people don't remember what had happened. So, as managers, I think we need to move to this approach of micro feedback. And I would genuinely believe that this would help people achieve their results, their OKRs a lot better. As in, you would see a boost in productivity. I'm assuming that this would be very powerful, and I think people would be a lot more happier. I mean, I personally, as a leader, would be happy if my manager is giving me such constructive feedback more frequently instead of just once a year.
I've got this feedback with many others also, where we've been discussing in other episodes, where we saw is uh, a quarterly or a yearly feedback will not help an employee to say, because there's a lot of work that is done, and you will have to give that kind of a feedback instantaneously. Is what I've got information, and it is valid at many pointers is what I understand, because if I'm not told at the right time, I may be doing something wrong, and that feedback, a tiny feedback, can play a big OKR win, right? It can be a big OKR win for us. Now, if I work for a month and I have a review with you, I get to know where I have to improve in a short period. And based on that feedback, I keep on improving. And when we look at over a period, you just have a list of pointers that you had given as feedback. These are the feedbacks that I got, and I can discuss on these feedbacks and where I stand or where I've changed myself. I think it is a very important point to look at point in time feedbacks, appreciation of good work. And I also
Mhm.
have seen people or leaders where they catch the right work being done. They catch pointers where you've done a good work, and then they say, a good work, man, and they appreciate. That appreciation takes things a longer way, is what I felt when uh, uh, pointer is given us, rather than going as a yearly OKR pointers there. Now, how do we, how do customer facing teams need one breath value prop? Any pointers on that,
I mean,
Pranav?
I think that's a tough question, but let me try. So I've heard of this company called HubSpot. I think they're a
Mm,
tech company. And what's unique about them is that they are encouraging their staff to
mhm,
have an elevator pitch, which can be done in maybe say 12 or 15 seconds or something like that. It is almost as equal as one breath. So you're
mm,
giving a pitch which your customer will listen while he's just taking one single breath. I think
okay.
that's what you mean by one breath value proposition, if I've understood your
Yeah,
question correctly,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So goes back to my earlier point where that attention today is so precious, it is so fragile. People are distracted very easily. And if your elevator pitch is able to convey the essence of what you are communicating, what you want to sell in that 12, 15-second window, I think you will see fabulous results. I mean, again, I don't know how much of this is true, but apparently HubSpot sales representatives who mastered this skill, their demo inquiry rates doubled, right? I mean, again, so these are all anecdotes, but I think it's something worth trying.
Wonderful. Now, how does a leader vulnerability messaging accelerate cultural change? Because what I've seen is people always say that leaders should know everything, but my view is it's not necessary. We also are vulnerable,
Yeah.
right? So, and pointers at times, if I and for example, if you and me start discussing on some topic and I am not aware, I can definitely say I am not an expert or I am not aware of this, which should not be a challenge as a vulnerability pointer that comes, and it boosts saying that everybody does not know everything. So your take on it. How do we look at this pointer?
I think it's very valid what you said. The traditional approach of leadership, or the myth that was propagated in the past, was this image of a leader who's strong, who knows it all. But in reality, I think people are looking for more authentic leaders, right? They are
Wonderful.
looking for people who are as human as the next person. I remember the Starbucks CEO, Howard Schultz, right? He is a big proponent of this leadership with vulnerability. It it helps people be more comfortable. It helps people to share more. It helps, you can say, model openness, right? As in, you can be a lot more open, a lot more emotional, and you are able to get your point across. So that, in my mind, is what builds culture. That authenticity, that emotional vulnerability is what builds culture, and we should encourage it. I mean, it is definitely something that progressive organizations need to focus on.
I think what we are talking about is admit, adopt, and accelerate, because we don't know something, we admit it, we try to adopt accordingly, and then we look at how do we accelerate on what we've adopted. So that's what I think is more important as what we look at when we talk about vulnerability, is what I think. What strategy edge comes from listen first board updates? So your take on it.
So listening, we did mention, right? It's
Yeah.
this culture of active listening is very important. And not necessarily when you are with the board, but with anyone, whether it's in your team, your subordinates, your customers, vendors, anyone it may be, right? Now, I think it was LinkedIn or a similar organization where the senior management had a very unique way of approaching board meetings. Instead of reporting numbers or using slides, I believe what they would do is that they would begin the board update with some brief insight about the market that their teams had, and generally ask questions, right? And the board members would be a lot more receptive. They would want to understand what's happening instead of just seeing some figures or some numbers on slides, right? This again builds back to an earlier point I was making about storytelling. So, this is another way of making it more engaging for the senior board members, that they want to understand what's happening. And the beauty of this is, what I read is that it reduces friction, or it reduces that tussle between the board and the management by a lot, where the board feels valued and listened to by asking these questions, and they are able to influence, the management is able to influence the board, and it gives more clarity all around. So I think there is a lot of merit in having such conversations, listening first, and sharing those updates with the board.
We spoke about this when we started the conversation, where we listen most of the time and get a overall collection of what exactly is that we are talking about, and then we start with this is what my understanding, or put a question saying that are we aligned? This is the topics that I've collected, or this is the information I've got, and then go with finishing saying that yes, we will do this, and this is what we will not do, and these are the updates that we should look at, is what I think more relevant when we talk about boards, is what I feel, and you
Correct.
put that very well. Now, why does asynchronized video outbound live calls for global strategy rollouts?
I think it's very simple, right? I mean, in today's day and age where people are spread across the world, right? They're not necessarily in one geographic location. They could be in different cities, different countries, different time zones. Having a strategy update, which is asynchronous, would really help, right? It would drive that additional clarity. It would give the same message. It would reduce the time zone problem of scheduling these meetings, right? So you keep your messaging very consistent. So I would definitely encourage people to record short videos and post it to explain what is the strategic intent that you have. And that is the skill that all senior leaders need to develop. I mean, they need to be very clear, they need to communicate very strategically. And asynchronous video does outperform live calls. That is my personal assessment of this. Prem, I'm not able to hear you.
Sorry, I was on mute. So sorry about.
Yes.
So I was wanted to understand, because the age today is about not having a lengthy pointer store, but it is more looking at storytelling, right? That's
Correct.
where we like how a narrative can be built, how
Yeah.
a pointer could be told. How can leaders use data storytelling to sway skeptical CFOs?
I think it's a very good question. Using data for storytelling, right? It's
Yeah.
not very easy, but I believe Spotify and some of these other organizations, they've been able to do that very successfully. So storytelling brings a lot more clarity. And I understand the finance function CFOs, they would always want to have hard data, hard numbers with them. But when you blend data along with a storytelling approach, that really drives the point. It gives it more meaning. There is a lot more clarity on what's happening. The finance team is also human, right? They are able to absorb it a lot better. They are able to widen their perspective. So numbers, I mean, I would say numbers show risk, whereas stories show reason on why things happen. So next time I would encourage any of the listeners that they need to try and follow this. Use data in a storytelling format and see how well you can influence your peers, your leadership teams, and make your point across much better.
Thanks for that. I think what you are saying is data tells, story sells, is what you are
Yeah,
trying to tell, right?
absolutely.
So, and what
Absolutely.
we've seen off late is uh, data is the new oil, right? So, you need to have data to present as much as facts what exactly the business is happening, how the business is performing, and what exactly happens. And when you have data with a story, it conveys better, is what I feel, right? So data is the new oil, is what the coin is getting, the pointer is getting coined now. Now, coming to what growth uptick follows when frontline employees master question based influence.
So the way I think of it is that any individual who is customer facing,
Mm.
they need to speak like a human. You
Okay.
know, I've borrowed this from Professor Dan Pink. I think he's a famous author. But what it means is that all of us have complained to some customer service executives, and we hear this standard response either on the phone or on email: sorry for any inconvenience that we may have caused. Right. And thinking to myself that it just sounds so impersonal, right? Would you be talking like that to somebody if you're face to face? You would just say, I'm sorry, what can I do to, make it better for you? So any customer service executive who's listening or any managers of such teams, what you can encourage your teams to do is talk like a human. See, assume that the customer is in front of you. Don't make the language very formal, very impersonal, but try and show that you really care, right? You can ask questions, you can understand what their concern is, what is their grievance, and based on that, you can try and address their queries and maybe put a smile on the customer. Ultimately, that's what it is about, right? The customer has a grievance, and if you're able to solve it and put a smile, that is ultimately the end goal of this entire exercise.
No, I think what you're saying is very right, because one of the case study that I was part of, so I was part of a large organization, Wipro to be very specific, for about 13 years. And my first project was in big trouble, where then when when my management came in and they asked is that, did you ask the right questions, right?
Yeah.
So I think questions turned out to be the major pointer for us, because when we went and met the customer had so many pain points. But when we addressed the pain points, that turned into a business for us, right? So we had a project of X value when we were able to address about 12, 13 points that he mentioned as pain points in various departments. Then we were able to turn that piece into a large business. We became X plus 5, X plus 6 pointers, where the business grew. When we had X, now we are having X plus 6, right? So it's a huge turnover. We took about 6 months to understand, analyze question based format and stuff like that. And we brought the customer to look at all the pain points, and we turned that into business for us. So I think that questioning is the right way of questioning also matters, is what I get when you're talking about this point.
Yeah.
Ask our NPS score also went out very very strong when we had the customer NPS score reviews done. So that's what I think, more engaging, more business is what I felt that we got. Now, why is brevity a competitive strategy in investor communication? Your take on it?
It's not just in investor communications. I mean, we talked about it, right? I mentioned that brevity means conviction. Now, if I were to specifically look at investor communications, see, again, investors probably meet hundreds of companies, be it startups or mature companies, day in and day out, right? They need to cut through the clutter and identify the core of your organization that will help them invest and help them make their returns that they are looking for, achieve their strategic objective. So there are a lot of people out there who've started believing that one can probably convey your story in 5 or 6 pages. You don't need hundreds of pages to communicate to an investor. You can just focus on a few key points, like what's your key core proposition, what's your the data that backs it up, uh, what are your projections, and why do you think it matters. So having this done or to a very meaningful and short update is something that you can probably communicate in 15-20 minutes or so, and then address the investor questions that you may have. So I would say that be clear, be concise, and use that to an advantage. So brevity means conviction. You don't need a lot. Sorry, you're on mute, Prem.
Sorry about it. Now, I was talking about inclusive part, right? When we inclusive language is, how do inclusive language tweak unlock hidden leadership potentials in diverse teams? Because you started with the video part where we are talking about where we don't have people in one region or one state. That's the point that we are trying to try. How do this inclusive language tweak that? So, any pointers on that, Pranav?
See, a lot of large organizations have the DEI initiatives within them, right? DEI stands for diversity, equality, and inclusiveness. We all talked about how you have to be inclusive in terms of having, people represented from both the genders, having people represented from different states or countries, people with different backgrounds in terms of education or experience, different languages that they speak. One thing that I was not aware of is age diversity, right? A lot of time, the language that we use, especially in hiring, we use the phrase, we want a young, vibrant person to, with fresh ideas. And it got me thinking that, am I being a little bit ageist in this sense that I'm not looking at people who are a little older, right? They are not qualified for this. So, age diversity is also something that I have now become a little bit conscious of. So, you need diversity in different forms and shapes, right? So, inclusive language means looking at all of this, that whatever words that we use, are we excluding anyone? So when I say I want a young, vibrant face, I am excluding people who are older and more experienced. They might have equally important things to contribute. But when I say things like that, they would feel excluded. Similarly, anyone in the minority, be it a religious minority, be it a gender minority, be it racial minority, we could invariably be using phrases and languages and metaphors which would make them feel excluded. And it is something one needs to be conscious about and ensure that what we do not offend anyone, we do not exclude anyone. So, as leaders, we need to start building that sensitivity in how we communicate. Again, you're on mute, Tim.
Sorry. I think what you're saying is word shape who applies, right? So I think that's the pointer that you want to look at. And when we see leadership from a female leadership applicants, there is a shift that happens when we look at this kind of pointer. Now coming to what strategic value arises from documenting decisions in 140 character decision tweaks. Is there anything that you can put across on saying 140 or 150 character pointers?
I think this whole Twitter culture or X culture started from that, right? That Twitter initially was not more than 140 characters.
Yeah.
And that forced people to be very creative in
Mm.
what they wanted to communicate. So,
Yeah.
having such artificial constraints actually increases the creativity of people. So, coming to the question, which is, if you've taken a certain decision, you should be able to communicate that in one sentence, either one sentence, maybe around 140 characters or so. And you should be able to communicate to your team, to anyone else, that this is what we did and why. So that one sentence should be enough. It builds clarity, it removes the clutter, it removes the noise. And I think there are many organizations who do it. I believe I've heard of Shopify do something in their day-to-day operations, that they are able to communicate those decisions to a wider team with such concise messages. I mean, they are not always looking to build lots and lots of pages and memos of why certain decisions were taken, but having a concise message helps them clarify and helps them move forward. So I would say shrink your decisions to a tweet and then you can scale up with clarity.
I think that's a valid point. You said string decisions grow alignment is what I think is a pointer that you are trying to mention,
Yes.
right? So when you give a pointer very short, crisp, it aligns. to the business, right? So that's what I think. Why are listening tools a CEO's fastest to growth driven strategy pivots? Your take on it, Pranav.
I think, see, strategy is something that doesn't necessarily come from the top. There will be different people across different levels in the organization, be it somebody at the ground level working with customers, to middle management, to senior management. They will all have a sense of the reality. And a leader's job is to go out and talk to people and go on these listening tours so that they are able to uncover what is already known, right? You need to bring that idea up to the surface. That is the key thing. So a lot of people definitely do it, especially when you are new to your role, new to your organization. Leaders then go out and talk to as many people across different stakeholder units, right? You could be a customer, a vendor, in-house employee, a subordinate, a senior leader, a board member, whoever it may be. You need to go and listen and go on these listening tours. That is what will help you pivot and define your strategy. It comes from unearthing what is already there instead of reinventing the wheel. That is my personal take on it. Listen like a leader and grow in your organization, grow in conversations.
I think this we discussed in the start of the point itself. The leader is the one who talks last after collecting all the.
Yes.
He listens to what is talking. Coming to my last question for the day, I have:
Mhm.
how can one micro habit, daily brief in 60 words, sustain leadership influence? Your take on it, Pranav.
Again, going back to my point about brevity, right? So, if you are reflecting on one aspect in the day, that, okay, what did I do right? And you are able to express that in 60 words or less. So, 60 words would probably be 3 or 4 sentences. That again will help you be very clear, be very articulate, right? And this is something that one needs to develop as a practice for their own self growth. So I would, the first thing I do in the morning is I would take a piece of paper and I would write down what happened in the previous day. I have slept over it. Some of the extreme emotions I have sort of let it wash over me. And then I just write down my reflections on what is it that happened, what is it that I could do better, what are the things that I'm grateful for, and what are the achievements that I had the previous day. So some of these things obviously take longer than 60 words, but my goal is to compress it and really get to the crux of the matter, get to that crux of self reflection, and ultimately help me become better as a leader. So the point here is that having a brief time for reflection would help you become better as a leader.
Thank you for that. I would like to summarize on some pointers that I have taken as a notes on what we discussed over the last 50 minutes now. And we started with high clarity communication on outperform loud charisma for enterprise growth is what we spoke about, where we spoke about some of the persons, where we spoke Satya Nadella, how he handles things and how he takes up pointers is for what we started with. Then we spoke about mid manager if master, uh, how does the strategy review see looks at, and that's where we spoke about. Then we spoke about silent signal leaders cut on decisions, where we spoke about steps to pre-write tag owners vote encouragement memo, where pre-lead slash meeting drags, right? So that's one point that we spoke about. Then we spoke about growth KPIs stall when top voices dominate town halls. That's one point where we spoke about loud rooms kill ideas pause to win, right? So that's what I think we spoke about on the question that we had. And we also looked at some of the revenue lift follows when sales techs use you twice often than as we, where we spoke about team versus you, how do we talk and put across pointers, That was what make it for them was deals close, right? So it makes more important when we talk about them rather than us, me or you, kind of a pointer, right? Then we spoke about leadership emails cap about 150 words, which I think is one way of putting a concise message and an impactful message while we don't write stories in emails, is what we spoke about. Then we spoke about some of the growth levers lies in strategic silence during negotiation. How silence or a pause makes an important point. That's what we spoke about. Then we spoke about OKRs, where how do we get feedbacks rather than having a 12-month feedback. How do we look at catch the good thing happening while somebody does things, and you appreciate small acts of good work, right? So that's what we spoke about. And we spoke about vulnerability, which is a key issue where leaders think they should know everything to be done, right? And I don't think so that is required. Where a leader also can be vulnerable, saying that I don't know. Right? That's one point that we spoke about. Then we spoke about listen first and board updates. We most of them hurry up in telling something rather than hurrying up and telling into or getting into conclusion. We listen, observe, then we adopt, admit, adopt, and accelerate is what we spoke about. Then coming to the next point, what we spoke about asynchronization video outperform live calls in the global environment, where we talk about different cultures, different zones, different regions. That's where we spoke about. And then we spoke about how data and storytelling. It was more important when we spoke, and we told data tells and story sells, and data is a new oil mine, right? Or new gold mine we can talk about. And we spoke about what are the first line employees master and question based influence, right? If you ask questions, why, what, how, and all those things, questions convert skeptics, right? So that's what we spoke about. Then we also spoke about on how language tweaks in hidden leadership potential in diverse teams, where again it's where we have different team, different locations, different places. So we spoke about word shape, who applies and stuff pointed there. And then on the last point, that is one point that we spoke about, how a 60-word recap boost retention for strategy task by 42%. A journal that we spoke about, 60-word debrief equals lasting influence. Those are the pointers that I had taken in the pointers that we wanted to discuss in today's topic. And it's been great having you here, Pranav. Any last words that you want to conclude before I close the session, Pranav?
Thank you very much. It was great to be on this show with you. Really appreciate it for giving me this opportunity and look forward to connecting again in the future.
Thank you, Pranav. To the audience, we have streamlined or streamed this podcast live onto LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. We hope that you have found this discussion valuable. Thanks for joining us, and looking forward to see you in our next episode. We have our next podcast scheduled on the 5th of August, our 279th episode, which is from model to mayhem, the hidden security risks of AI in production environments. That's the point that we are discussing on 5th of August at 6:30 p.m. Looking forward to see you again. Good day and bye for now. Thank you, Pranav. Thank you for being here. Good day.